Hello and welcome to the Crystal Palace versus Leicester City pre-match preview. This is a very interesting game, a battle between two teams that are at the moment quite close to one another in the table, as I'll bring up right here. So this is the mighty 15th versus 16th place in the Premier League. Who will come out on top? Both teams have just 1 point. Both teams have now completed their squads and got pretty good squads. And it'll be interesting to see which of these two teams comes out on top. Now, Palace has surprised people a little bit because they only have 1 point out of their first 3 games. At the end of last season, they went on a great run. Their new manager, Oliver Glasner, who we're going to come to in just a second, really transformed them and made them a really good team, not only to watch, but also in terms of performances too. Here's their last game against Chelsea, 1-1, Eze with a brilliant equaliser. It's a game that I feel they maybe were a bit lucky to get a point from, but they played pretty well overall. They actually did have quite a number of shots on target, and they always looked a threat when they got the ball. Perhaps more accurate is to look at this game against West Ham. Now, this one they actually lost 2-0, but I watched the whole of this game back in its entirety for research for this video, and they were extremely impressive. I think this scoreline was really a bit unfair. Basically, Palace got caught on transition, and that's something we're going to see here as maybe the way that we can beat them in the game on Saturday. But otherwise, you can see they had a lot more possession. There were a lot of shots, lots of touches and passes. For the most part, they controlled the game. Maybe they didn't quite create as many clear-cut chances as they would like, but they definitely created some good ones, and they were a bit unlucky to lose. So maybe they didn't deserve a point against Chelsea, but I would argue they might even deserve 3 points here. So overall, perhaps we're thinking, oh, are Palace going to be struggling a little bit this season because they've sold Michael Olise to Bayern Munich? I don't think so. They look pretty good, and I think with some of the acquisitions that they made, they're going to have a pretty good season. Can they push for Europe? Not quite sure there, but they do look solid to me. Right, I want to talk about the main man, Oliver Glasner. If you're not familiar with this gentleman's game, I'm going to get you in the know and inform you about why he's good and why you've got to pay a bit of attention. So Oliver Glasner in 2022, he took charge of Eintracht Frankfurt and they won the Europa League. I think this was one of the first European competitions they won in a long time, maybe the first ever, and they did a brilliant job there. They beat teams like they beat Rangers in the final, but they also beat Barcelona along the way. I think they beat West Ham along the way. They were really, really impressive, including some really good away wins, such as in the Camp Nou. Here was his team at the time, and he played 3-4-3, and that is his system. That's his system that he plays at Palace as well. And I'm also going to highlight Daichi Kamada, who he's actually brought to Palace and will be featuring against us on Saturday. But this was his team. They did really, really well. He actually lost his job about, I think, 6 to 8 months after winning this competition, which was a bit of a surprise. But I think that they lost some of their key players and they overachieved. And I think it was always going to be hard to repeat the brilliant European form they had. I think in the league, they domestically were a bit inconsistent. So, you know, a bit of a shame, but I mean, he did great for them. And I think they will treasure those memories forevermore, the Frankfurt fans. So, you know, seeing Glasner come to the Premier League, I don't think was a surprise. But I do have to say, I was quite surprised that he ended up at Palace. Not because Palace are a bad team, but Palace generally tend to be a team that's solid, mid-table, never really in danger of going down. I think they've been in the Premier League now for at least 10 seasons, maybe more. And we always associate them with Roy Hodgson, who really kept them solid. And you know, the last time they tried to be exotic, they hired Frank de Boer, and he lasted just 4 games. So I think that they realized that it was better to be more solid. So them going for Oli Glasner was really quite a sign of ambition. And congratulations again him as another top manager in the Premier League. It really is the Super League if you think about it. So I want to get you a bit familiar about their lineup. Now, their lineup's a bit hard to predict because they've signed quite a few players. As mentioned before, they lost Michael Olise to Bayern Munich for something like 60 or 70 million pounds. Great player. Certainly someone, in my opinion, who's capable of playing for a really top side, as he proved. But they've used that money to strengthen the squad in many places. So I'd expect Eddie Nketiah here to be making his debut against us. Whether he starts or comes on, I don't know. But that's 30 million striker right up front there. And, you know, we've taken the striker that they didn't want, Odsonne Edouard, to our club, although I don't think he could play this game, probably because of the loan agreement. You can't play against your previous club. Kamada came in the season. He is the Olise replacement, and he's looked quite good so far. But it's in defence where they've done quite a bit of work here. So whether these guys will or won't start, I don't know. But Mark Guehi is going to be staying. He was linked with a big money move to Newcastle, but they kept him over the summer. And they've also signed 2 defenders near the end of the window. Maxence Lacroix, who is someone who is linked with Leicester, he's fast, good on the ball, aggressive tackling. I think he's just ready made for the Premier League, and I think he'll do good in this system. And they also signed Trevor Chalobah on loan from Chelsea, which I think is a great pickup too. They've got other options on the bench that they can use. But overall, that gives them, I think, a very combative but fast defense. And I think that really kind of supports their team going forward. And so they play this 3-4-3 system. And we're going to come into that in just a bit. So now I want to talk about Oli Glasner and how they play. And I think this is important because for me, this is quite fun. Seeing a coach like this, wasn't really familiar with how they worked in the Premier League. We just knew that they were doing well at the back end of last season. But how did they achieve this? And how did he manage to make such a big transition in the way that Palace played and their results so quickly? And the answer is because he was quite daring and went for quite an aggressive system, a very modern system, and quite an exciting one. And I think it'll make for a very interesting battle on Saturday. So right away, the way that Palace build up is they use a 3-2-5 shape, which is very common. You'll basically see that all the teams in the Premier League are doing it these days. But actually, what Palace do as well, just like what Enzo did with us last season, is you can see that their keeper here, number 1, Henson, he's going to step up and he actually acts as that additional centre back in their build-up shape. So why do teams do this? Well, actually, I can show you here in action. You can see he's here on the ball. You can see that one of the centre halves, this was actually Chris Richards at the time, has moved out to the left-hand side, another centre back here and another centre back here to give you a lot of wide angles. And you've got the 2 double pivot midfielders here. And the reason why teams do this is to create a box midfield in the build-up phase of the game. So because teams like to press a lot these days in modern football, you always want to have an option where you can make an easy pass to get out of trouble, because that's better than just punting the ball downfield. Look, sometimes you've got to do that, but otherwise, you want to make sure that you can keep the ball for long periods. You can tire out the opposition. So having this shape allows them to do that, and you can see that as pivotal in the play. And what we also see is with both the fullbacks, well, actually, these are centre halves that move out to the width. That also gives them wide options. And it also means that if there are wide forwards, such as the way that we play, like Fatawul will have to cling and follow this number 4 here rather than pressing into the middle. So it makes more room and makes it easier for you to find your passes when building out. So that's a key difference of their kind of system. But what we can also see is that, they have a 3-4-3, but these 2 fullbacks, well, they're wing backs, right? They really push up quite high. I'll come to that in a moment. So that's in their kind of like building right from the keeper shape. But when it gets to the kind of middle part of the field, here you can see how aggressive Palace are. So you can see that they also have another box midfield. So they have their double pivot here. And you can see that these 2 players, we want to call them 10s or box crashing 8s, very similar to the way that Enzo would play. And here you can see on the other side that we've got that their wing backs are pushed up to really kind of support the attack. So that means you've got 5 men pushing forward. And sometimes one of these double pivots will attack as well to make a 6th man. So they're really trying to be aggressive. And this has pros and cons. And so here I'm trying to highlight their 2 wing backs. And these are people that we should be getting quite familiar with. So in the last few games, they've used Tyrick Mitchell on the left-hand side, who's a Palace Academy graduate, and they've got Daniel Munoz. Not too sure about where they got this player, but he's playing on the right-hand side at the moment and seems to be fitting in the team. So as we see here, you can see just how high up the pitch they press. And this really means that the opposition have quite a tough kind of struggle because, you've got a lot of attacking players and you need to guard them. What it also means, though, is that if they lose the ball, it is one of the weaknesses. And this is, I guess, both the strength and the weakness, and why some managers prefer to do things one way and another manager do it another way. So the issue of Palace is that if they lose the ball, you can see that these areas, which is where both wing backs have pushed up on, are quite empty. And it means that there's an easy pass into those areas and it can cause them trouble. However, the upside of them playing this way is they're looking to overwhelm you on the attack. So it's quite an aggressive approach, because if you compare this to Cooper generally doesn't push quite that many players up front, not in the initial phase of the build-up. He'll wait a little bit before someone supports the attack. That means you're more solid on transition, but it means that you're maybe less likely to score. And as you know, we've had some issues with that in our games so far. So that's why this is quite an interesting battle, because we'll see like which of the 2 approaches, Glasner or Cooper's, works better in a competitive Premier League game. So because they have this extra man advantage, what that means with Palace is they can find the free man. So in this case, I've highlighted, I think this was Elise last season. And you can see that despite the fact there's 4 men around, he's capable of drifting in the lines. We've got a wing back on the right-hand side, so there's still an option there. And that means that their 2 10s, that's going to be Kamada and Eze, have the opportunity to drift around, pick up the ball. And because they're both technical players, very creative, they can make things happen. And that's going to be a big story of the game and something we have to watch out for. The way that they play with this extra man advantage that they try to create is that they can have overloads and they try to create 2 versus 1s. So here we've got a pass from Adam Wharton, and he's been brilliant for them. What a pickup for he is. Bought for Blackburn, I believe, for 20 million, already got into the England team. He could well go for 60 or 70 million by the end of this season. He's on the ball. He's playing the ball forward. And there we can see that we've got this is Eze trying to move forward. And we've got Mitchell making the overlap run there. So he can play a ball like this. And there's multiple people can get it. And here we can see in the attack that with Wharton, that's 5 people here forwards. And the other wing back there, so that's 6. And they've got another person coming up here for 7. And if you compare this to Wolves at the time here, they've got 4, 5, 6. Well, it's about 7 back as well. But this game is one of their real eye-catching performances they made and a great result. And it's where a really good indication of how Palace play and how they've been transformed to a very entertaining team. Here's an example from this season and recent game. And here you can see that Wharton's picked up the ball again, and he's going to play this ball beautifully through the lines here to Eze. And he didn't score, but he had a close one-on-one here and forced the keeper into a good save. And I would say that something that I've identified, probably not the only one to spot this, but Eze and Wharton are key to their attack. They're the 2 players that really make things happen. If they have good games, it could be tough for us. But equally, they're the 2 players that if we can shut them down, we could also stop Palace getting going. Palace love to attack the half space. This is something we saw a lot of with Maresca last season. We do it this season too, but we don't do it as often as we used to. And the main reason we don't do it as often is because we aren't committing as many men forwards. But because Palace do, you can see that they'll often have this opportunity to put the run on. So here we can see that their wing-back has the ball and he's got options. He could either go for a cross into the middle, he could cut back in, or he could play the ball into the half space here. And of course, he knows if he plays the ball in there, that his attacking number 10 is going to be running in there to pick it up. So here, if you're the defender, you're doomed, right? Do you stick tight to your man, but then this ball gets played in here? Do you follow this man that's running in, but then this guy's got free space? And you can see that this guy's trying to run back to get in space, but it's difficult to get back in time, especially on transition. So here's the problem, right? So whilst the player can play the ball into this half space here, he can also cut back in here. So you're causing many problems. And this is something we did a lot last season. And it's a really good way to overwhelm teams, drag them out of position, break them down, and be creative. Right, that's how they build up, but how do they defend? So when they're in the defensive phase of the game, you can see here that actually Palace have 5 men spread across the back, which makes them very tough to break down. Now, I will say that's once they get into this shape. And so the difference is how they go from their attacking shape into the defensive shape. And that sort of few seconds is where the carnage can be caused. And this is why transitions in the Premier League are so deadly. But if they have to defend, Palace can be very resolute. What you can see in this picture is you can see there's a very compact space between the back and the front. With 5 men out wide here, this is very hard to get through. Again, you've got areas maybe to pick up the ball here in the wide areas. And that maybe is the difference between this game and the last game we played against Villa. So Villa try to force you in centrally, whereas Palace are kind of keen for you to go wide. But that means if they can win the ball back, they can kind of overwhelm you in the transition themselves. Here we can see from kickoff again, this is a defensive structure. You can quite kind of see their shape, that they've got the kind of 3, the 4 across here, but look at the spaces they pick up and 3 men up front. The 3 are always there, and a 3-man defense is always going to be hard when you've got a single strike and wide forwards, as you can go 1-for-1 on the defensive phase. Here again, looking at the defensive structure, just look how compact they are. Just see how many people are all compressed into this area. Hard work to get through here. So in this game, they were 1-0 up against Man United. They got something from the game. They ended up winning. So it's always going to make it difficult to get through there. And so they are well drilled defensively and well coached defensively. The manager's done a very good job. Another key thing that he brought into their team, though, was a high line. And this is interesting because the last game we played, Villa also played a high line, and Palace seems to be going that way. Now, I think the difference between the 2 teams is that I think Villa have defenders that are better defensively, but I think Palace have more mobile defenders. And so it actually suits their game a bit more. Again, with the 2 signings that I mentioned in Chalobah and Lacroix, and adding to Guehi, they've got pace in all of those positions, which means that it's harder to catch them out on a high ball, which we'll obviously look at a bit later, the long ball over the top, but it protects them somewhat. But here again, we can see that although they're 2-0 up, just look how far everyone pushes up. This was Joachim Andersen, who they sold to Fulham. Kind of surprising. I have a feeling they sold him because he wasn't the fastest. That's why they played him at the back. So it's a bit like Vestergaard for us. Good on the ball, but maybe has some deficiencies. And I guess because the way that they play, they put 2 people going forwards. They really wanted that pace at the back, which is something that they fixed. Here we see again, they've pushed up. There's a man offside here, and they managed to win the ball back. And again, you can see that they're just really good at compacting the game, making you play in tight spaces. And what's really good about when you're playing in a compact space is that if you lose the ball, it means that everyone's much closer to one another, which means that your immediate press or winning the ball back quickly is going to be that much more effective. We also see that the way they play as well is that when they go for the press, they all kind of push another man forwards too. This is something that we try to do also, so it's similar to our system, though we only really tend to do this on the left-hand side, as this would be Christiansen for us, whereas with Palace, this can be reversed on both sides. So you can see if the ball is in this area, they can still kind of push 5 men forwards to run a press, but still retain a good amount of players back in case the ball gets broken on transition. But that's when everything works out according to plan. So yeah, I talked about winning a ball back. Here we can see some really good examples of this. So Wolves have the ball here in a dangerous area, but you can see there's already 2 men that are rushing to kind of get there. And if he tries to turn back, here's where the double pivot can zoom in as well and make it tough for you. So that means they can snap the ball back, win it quickly, and start their own counters. And they've got really good players on the counters with, in this case, Eze and Kamada. Another example here from the same game. Again, you can see despite the fact that they're 2-0 up, they're going to be able to snap into this player, win the ball back, and start their own attack. And yeah, here's an example of those offensive transitions. So here's against Burnley. They've managed to win the ball back. And you can here see that they've now got 4 against 3 in this opportunity. Here's Mateta, who is the other striker they could play. He's occupying 2 men, which means there's 2 other players completely free and great opportunities to score. And they've got players that are capable of providing that quality and finding the back of the net. Right, so speaking of who's the star man, it's pretty obvious. Not sure if you saw the goal he scored against Chelsea, but a great goal with his right foot. He starts on the left-hand side, can cut him with his right, but he's pretty good on his left foot. I'll give you a funny anecdote. I actually saw this player play at QPR a few seasons ago with my friend who's actually a professional scout for one of the clubs here in London. And he told me, this player is brilliant. He's definitely going to end up being a Premier League star one day. And it was true. So Danny, if you're listening to this, you were right. You were right, although I did agree with you on the time. But yeah, just to show you how effectual he is. And I didn't realize this. This was kind of quite a shock for me. But just look at how much better Palace do when Eze's in the team compared to when he's without. They literally average more than twice as many points, twice as many goals. So really a pivotal player. And so that means that our double pivot, which is likely going to be Skip and Winks, and it's probably going to be Winks that's up against him, has to pay close attention to him. Because if they can keep feeding him the ball, going to be in trouble. And I think the problem is, though, is that this guy is an X-Factor player. He is the type of person who can create something out of nothing. Now, hopefully he's done that last time round against Chelsea, so he won't do it this time round, but we have to pay him his dues. He's a great player. I believe he's got a clause for something like 60 million. I'd be surprised if he's at Palace next season. I think someone will pay it. He seems destined for a Champions League team, in my opinion. Right, so now we've learned a little bit about how Palace play, but what about their weaknesses? What does Cooper need to do in order to exploit their system so that we have a chance of winning? And I think we can and will win this game, actually. So, mentioned it before, but when they're building up, there's these big holes here. So we need to grab the ball from them on transition, play the ball into these areas, and you can have an easy run at goal. And to kind of give you some evidence of that, here is a recent game against West Ham. And you can see here, Wharton again is on the ball and he's trying to find Eze. So again, these 2 players like to link up a lot. But what ends up happening is you can see West Ham have got kind of 5 players in the good area. So they manage to win the ball back off him. Someone actually makes a challenge from behind. And then the ball comes to Kilman, who they've just signed, and Kilman starts striding out of defense, does a great job here. And you can already see in this picture that they could be in a bit of trouble. Because although they've got a lot of men compacted here, as shown in their pressing shape, and they are trying to win the ball back quickly, you can see already that this number 10, if he spins, there's a lot of room here. And just look at all this space on the other side of the pitch, which is where you want to play the ball to. And this is what happens. So Kilman still has the ball. He manages to run forward. And here's Jared Bowen. Arm raise, pass me the ball, pass me the ball. He receives the ball and he's got the ball here. But just to show you sort of how open they are, not only has he got the ball, at least he is being marked here, but now we've got Wan-Bissaka, who West Ham just signed in the summer, also making a forward run. So Bowen can either shoot himself, try to play the through ball to his teammate here, or he can wait for the wing back to come on and play the ball to him for him to score. So they're wide open here, right? 2v1 in this situation, 3 versus 3 in total, more players arriving. And what ends up happening is Bowen cuts into his left foot and boom, have some of that. That's where the ball is, puts it in the back of the net. Jared Bowen and his trusty left foot strike again. And that all came actually from Palace being on the attack. So that's the Premier League in a nutshell, right? Sometimes when you're attacking, you are actually at your most vulnerable. And that is why, whilst I think everyone in the Leicester fan base right now is a little bit concerned with Cooper being a bit too conservative, I do think it's important that people understand that he is trying to be pragmatic whilst retaining some attacking outlet. Like Burnley, one of the reasons they lost last year is they didn't really make any changes, right? They kept trying to put the men forward and they were just getting caught on transition the whole time. With Cooper, his kind of difference is that rather than always pushing 5 up front, he'll push 4 up front. And that means you've got one man, less man to work with, but you've got one man back if you lose the ball. Now, that might change now that we've got our fully completed squad for the season. But I think if you look at our performances, we have a pretty, look, we're actually above Palace coming into this game. And we've played 2 teams in the top 5 as well. So, you know, we haven't done that badly, even though the Fulham result, I will admit, I think was a bit of a disappointment. Right, other things that I'd expect us to do to take advantage. I've taken this from the Villa game, so I'm sure we're going to see it again. But Mad stepped up. Why was he stepping up? He was stepping up so that he could play, not the only reason, but certainly one of them was so he can play the long ball over the top. Also to add as an extra option of playing out from the press. But he was trying this quite a few times. Now here, their sweeper keeper, which was Martinez, came out and got the ball. But this is maybe somewhere where we could take advantage of, because Emi Martinez, I think, is probably the best sweeper keeper in the league, just because of the way that Villa play. Palace, because they're playing Henderson, he's a good keeper, don't get me wrong, and he will probably try and attempt this, but I don't think he's quite that good. So I suppose one downside is we know that the Palace defenders are going to be faster, so they're going to be able to get back quicker, but their keeper might not get out as fast. So I think this is, again, something to work on. What I just hope, though, is I hope that we don't fall into the same trap as the last time round, where I felt we went for the long ball too often, and it just made it very easy for Villa. And in fact, for all the times we played the long ball, not once did we even create a half chance. So ultimately, we were just giving them the ball back. So I hope that this time round, we're doing a bit better on the distribution, a bit cuter with the runs, run to the outside rather than the inside. That's where the space is going to be in this game. And it could work for us. But it wouldn't surprise me if we were to score if it came off that, because that is a glaring weakness in the way that they play when it goes wrong. Right. So that's some of the weaknesses. But what is the key battle? And for me, I think it's the battle of the double pivots is basically how I would summarize it. So we've got Winks and Skip, and Palace have got Wharton and Hughes. And it's kind of interesting if you look at these 4, because who's the best player out of these 4? I'd probably say right now it's Adam Wharton, given that he's just broken through to the England team. He might not be as experienced as Harry Winks. Maybe the 2 are on a par. But let's be generous and say, look, he's a player I wouldn't mind seeing at Leicester, put it that way. But Will Hughes, he's a decent player. He's done well for himself to forge a career in the Premier League. But I don't think he's as good as either Oliver Skip or Harry Winks. So overall, are they balanced? I think we might have the slight edge here. And I think that is going to be important in this game if we're going to get something out of it. Why? This is something we did against Villa, and it's something I expect to see in this game as well. What we're seeing here is here's Villa's double pivot. And in this game, it was Onana, Amadou Onana, and Yuri Tielemans. And what was interesting is you can see that both Vardy and Ndidi in this case, they were blocking the passing lanes into these players. And they were careful to do this no matter which one of the centre-backs had the ball or if Martinez had the ball. So you can see that the ball got played back to Martinez, and you can see that both of them are following across to make sure that this passing lanes aren't in. So saying, okay, your centre-backs and your wide centre-backs can have the ball, but we're not going to allow your double pivot to get the ball. And that is important because Wharton, Hughes is also pretty good, but Wharton especially has got great eye for finding a key pass and playing through the lines. So blocking the passing lane to him will be crucial. But speaking of that, there is a tactic that we may see that I think actually we should try, that Fulham did to us. And what did Fulham do to us? So we had a double pivot here as well. And here I've got Winks circled, and I've also got Ndidi circled. But look at the position of the Fulham players and why this is interesting. So they're blocking the passing lane to Winks, so our keeper cannot play the ball to him. But they are not blocking the ball to Ndidi. So they want him to be free. And what they were trying to do is to trap him. They know that even though Ndidi is a good player, when he's got his back to goal, he's nowhere near as good. His turning isn't as good. So they were looking us to play the ball into Ndidi, and then they would pounce on him. And that was their pressing trigger to try and grab the ball back. And I wonder if we could do the same against Hughes. I think he's a good player, but he's not the most mobile, in my opinion. I think he's one of those players that is better when he's facing goal. So we could play this way and try and encourage them to pass it in there and look to close them down. And look, we just signed Kanoos, who's both creative but has good tackling interceptions, and it would be him that maybe would be the one to try and win it back there. So we shall see how that goes. We could even push one of our double pivot players forwards to try and help out here too. But that wouldn't surprise me if we were to try it. And personally, that's the way that I would go about, because I think if you can block Wharton, then that in some ways blocks Eze getting the ball too, because he normally receives it from him. And with Hughes, even if he does manage to turn his way out of trouble, the bet we're making is that he's not going to be as good at doing that as Wharton, and it'll make their attacks a little bit less efficient. Let's see if that does or doesn't come true. Right. So how do I think we'll line up, stroke want us to line up? This is not how I would want us to line up, but this is what I think Cooper will do. And I think that the biggest change here is that I think Ndidi will come out of the team and El Kanous will come in. I think Ndidi's actually had quite a good start to the season. If you look at his rankings, he's rated pretty high because he wins the ball back a lot. He's even got an assist in the last game. He won the header that Buonanotte scored from. So he's very good actually up the field. But we know that his technique's not the best and he's not the most creative. And creativity is what we're really calling out for. And that's where I feel Kanous can step in. I also think that Bilal, we noticed even in this previous game that he likes to drop back a little bit too. And that could be good because I think if we catch him on transition, he might be the guy that plays that slide pass, slide rule pass into the wings to find some of our fast wingers so we can score. Now, for that reason, I've also put Mavadidi in the team. I think all the fans are kind of crying out for him. I understand, though, why Cooper has gone sometimes for the harder working players. But I feel, again, that the way that Palace play, because we know that they're weak on transition, that I would say that the key players here are going to be Patel and Mavadidi if we're going to score. So you'd want them in. And I know that the way we play is Christensen bombs up, so Mavadidi isn't quite on the wing, but he's still fast and skillful, as he showed. I also think he was really responsible for us getting back into the game, even though we ultimately lost last week. In my opinion, he deserves to start. We'll see if that does or doesn't happen. Vardy will play up top because Edouard will be loan tied for this match. They'll have a clause in their contract meaning that he can't play. I'd expect to see him against Everton. Other changes, I don't think Vestergaard will come into the team. I think he'll keep Okoli and Fast together. And I think the reason for that is so they have pace. So if we get caught out on the transition ourselves, we're a bit stronger. I think Vestergaard will start against Everton though. And that will probably be a better suited game for him. I think also this will be an interesting game because even if this lineup is slightly wrong, I think that these next two games, we're going to learn a lot about Cooper because one is away and one is at home. The Everton game, let's be honest, that's a must-win game. We literally must win that game, which means we're going to have to attack and we're at home. So whatever team he picks there will be his version of an attacking team. So let's see what that is. This game, I personally, if it was me, would also go to attack. And the reason I would go to attack is that I feel that even though Palace are a very good team, I think for them, if they were to lose this game, it's not the end of their world. I think they've got too much quality in their squad that they're in no chance of going down, especially with a manager as good as Glasner. But they've got some new players they might put into the team and they might take a bit of time before they get up and running. Now, for us, we've got that PSR monkey completely off our back. And if that hasn't given the team a boost, I don't know what will. And so that's why, if it was me, I would try and lean into that morale and get us to attack. I think Cooper will be a little bit between the two. So that's why I think he'll take Ndidi out but put El Kanous in. But what he could have done is been even braver here, right? And maybe he could have put Ricardo in, keep Vestergaard and be like, I don't care about the transition so much. I want to attack and get more possession. But I think this will be more of a 50-50 game, but he will know that transition is probably the most likely way that we're going to score against them and forcing those transitions. Right, so overall, what are my predictions? It's going to be a competitive game and it's going to be determined for both teams by moment of transition. And to be honest with you, that has been the story of the season so far and most likely will be. Premier League is really Bundesliga-like, I would say, that outside of the top two, who I feel have more of a controlling style because they're very good in possession. Everyone else, it's battles of pressing and which kind of basketball game suits the other team. For us, the wingers for Leicester are most likely to score. If we can feed those players, they've got a great chance. Now, that, as I say, means that you start with your attacking players or do you bring them on when players are getting tired? So in my post-match analysis against Villa, what I highlighted is that every time either manager made a substitute, they made an impact within 5 minutes of coming on. Like literally, Villa put on their striker and he scored immediately. Then Cooper put on Mavadidi and he scored like 3 minutes. Well, he didn't score, but he played it into Buonanotte and we scored because he skinned his man 3 minutes after coming on. And then just when we were getting on top of the game, Emery made another sub, took off his fullbacks, changed them, and they managed to regain the balance a little bit and stop us from getting the equaliser. So, will Cooper attack or look to counter? And honestly, there are arguments for both. Now, for me, because it's already been 3 games, we don't have our first win. I think we need to get on the board. I think this next run of games, I did a show with blue tinted glasses, locks over there, but we said that we've got to start picking up wins. And I think this is a game that we can win. Again, I think against Fulham, even though Fulham are a good team, it was a disappointing result. I don't think the performance was awful, but we could have been better. So for that reason, I choose to be an optimist. I think it's going to finish Palace 1, Leicester 2. I think it will be a hard-fought game. Moments of quality for both, but something just tells me that I think we're going to win. So that's it. Thank you very much for watching. Please leave any comments, likes. Please subscribe to the channel. And if there's any Palace fans watching, look, please let me know. Did I get your team right or wrong? I'm trying to learn. For me, what I really like about doing this show is actually looking at how other teams play. And I have to say that Oliver Glasner is very impressive. And I've got to be honest with you, I'm quite jealous of Palace because I think you've shown that after kind of years of mediocrity, which even some of my friends who are Palace fans will admit, the future looks pretty rosy. And maybe after your first 3 games, you're thinking, Europe's not really on. But I really am quite impressed with your squad and the way that you play. And I believe that in Dougie Friedman, who's your director of football, you're going to keep picking up those gems going forward. So I think the future looks bright for you guys. How long it will take, I'm not sure, but wouldn't be surprised if you're in the upper, could be top half of the table this season. We shall see. So thank you very much and see you next time.